After 6 years at Penn State, the Clifford era has ended with roses as Penn State defeated Utah 35-21 in the Rose Bowl. Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm Gianna Cutaia alongside Joey David and Justin Ciavolella. Tonight we will discuss the Nittany Lions' incredible performance in the Rose Bowl, the surprise players of the season, and most importantly, the future of Penn State football. To start off, I want to talk about the Rose Bowl. Sean Clifford left it out on the field. He went 279 yards with 2 touchdowns. And then we had breakout freshman Nicholas Singleton rush 120 yards with 2 touchdowns also. So, Justin, let's start with you. What do you think about Penn State's performance in the Rose Bowl?
Well, I'll start with Sean Clifford. It was a fitting end to a rather impressive career with Penn State football. Look, he had his ups and downs, and at times there was a little bit of turmoil on maybe who should be starting at quarterback. But at the end of the day, Sean Clifford gave it his all to Penn State and really is the epitome of what it meant to be a Nittany Lion. So I think this Rose Bowl, as they sent the Pac-12 champions home, well, packing, it was fitting that Sean Clifford had another great performance. And you look at the big difference maker in the Rose Bowl, that was the big playability led by Sean Clifford and Nicholas Singleton. Clifford passed it to Keandre Lambert-Smith for receiving touchdown over 85 yards. Nicholas Singleton a rushing touchdown over 85 yards as well. And that was the first time in Rose Bowl history that the same team rushed a touchdown and passed for a touchdown over 80 yards. So just all around, the big playability for Penn State in the Rose Bowl separated them from Utah.
Yeah, I could not agree more with you. And the big thing that Penn State really did was use that big playability to help play their style of football. And Penn State is always at their best when they don't have to they don't have to change their game plan. They can just play Penn State football. And you have to take your hat off to Sean Clifford for a great career. Throughout the ups, the downs, he did everything he could for this place. But what was most important as well was the defense. They had 6 combined sacks throughout the defense, as well as a pick from Jair Brown and a pick from Kalen King. And with those just making life difficult for the opposing quarterbacks of Utah is really what helped Penn State win the game.
Definitely. You guys both bring up some really good points. And you guys mentioned some really key players for Penn State. But I'm more curious to know about who surprised you this past season for Penn State. Joey?
I have to go and say Abdul Carter. Linebacker University has their next stud. And although he really didn't have that much of a big impact in the Rose Bowl, only having 1 tackle, and he was really put in coverage mostly, he had an amazing season for the Nittany Lions. And with most of his stats, he ended up becoming a true freshman All-American, second-team All-Big Ten, and everything he did really helped elevate the defense in a position of need. Penn State is still going to have him, obviously, and Manny Diaz is going to make sure that Abdul Carter is the reason why opposing offensive coordinators have nightmares.
Yeah, Abdul Carter, he was a little bit absent in that Rose Bowl game, but it's because they put him into coverage more so than going for tackles. But he had one heck of a season, and Manny Diaz has to get a lot of credit for that in his first year in Happy Valley. But for me, it's the offensive line. They took a big step forward this season, and maybe in the passing game they actually took a step backwards. They allowed more sacks. Sean Clifford was on the ground more. He was forced to throw a lot faster this year because the offensive line was a little shaky in the passing game. But Penn State had a running game for the first time in a while, and that's because of the offensive line. Led by Olu Fashanu, along with many others, they were able to open holes. They averaged 4.8 yards per carry this season compared to 3.2 last year. 28 rushing touchdowns compared to the 11 last year. That's a big, big step forward for the offensive line, and they have 3 starting offensive linemen returning along with some depth pieces, and they're going to have a few new recruits in. So I think the offensive line is just going to continue to grow, and Penn State will be able to figure out the pass blocking and the running blocking that's already there, and I think the offensive line could play a big factor going forward for Penn State.
You both bring up some really good points. The defense for Penn State and the offense this past season looked really good, especially towards the end of the season. Now let's move on from the past and look into the future. Penn State has a lot of youth on their team, but now Sean Clifford has finished his career out. What do you think the future looks for the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, well, I think the future for the Nittany Lions, it's going to be bright, and it starts with the two running backs in Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, who really came onto the scene this year behind that offensive line that I just talked about, and were able to run all over defenses. A big step forward for Penn State. Then the defense, which Joey mentioned, big steps forward as well there. And the big thing with Penn State going into next year, a lot of returners on their team. The one question mark, and it's kind of hard to believe I'm saying it's a question mark, is Drew Aller. Because yes, he was put into games at times this year, but he didn't play too often in the big-time situations. Obviously, that was Sean Clifford. So I think for Drew Aller, he's going to have to, get in there, get used to playing in, meaningful minutes. Not saying every minute's not meaningful, but where he played this year, Penn State already had big leads. So I think the one question mark going forward for Penn State is how everything meshes with Drew Aller as the starting quarterback. And they just got two wide receiver transfers in Malik McClain and Dante Cephas, and I think those will be big factors in Drew Aller's development, but it's still a matter to see his raw talent and how that plays out.
Yeah, and developing quarterbacks is not an easy job. Many coaches struggle with it, and obviously Penn State hopes to see the best from Drew Aller next season. But the big word for me when you look at the season next year is familiarity. There are so many names that are going to be returning to Penn State next year, and they are all going to have a big veteran impact. You think about players like Theo Johnson, Caden Wallace, Keandre Lambert-Smith, and there's so many more. And they're all going to help out in their position groups. The only two question marks that I see, other than quarterback, obviously, are wide receiver, but wide receiver, it's not from talent. It's because a lot of those guys haven't seen the field a lot, especially in the Penn State offense with the new transfers. But with Keandre Lambert-Smith coming back, that's going to be a huge help and be a good veteran to help out the younger receivers that Penn State has coming up. And defensive tackle, P.J. Mustipher leaving is a very, very huge blow. And right now, if people look at Penn State's defense, the biggest hole is right up that A-gap. So teams are going to start running up the middle against Penn State until someone really starts to come into their own.
Mm-hmm. I'm very excited to see what Penn State has to do this coming up season. That's all we have for this edition of Penn State Sports Night. The Nittany Lions' future is looking bright as they have returning faces on their side. Will that be enough for another top 10 season? We will have to wait for the fall. For Joey David and Justin Ciavolella, I'm Gianna Cutaia. Have a great night.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind the scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.